Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Mindset Breakthrough podcast. Our guest today is Gary Plaag, who I'm thrilled to have. I actually met Gary at a wedding like a couple months ago, somewhat randomly, just kind of started chatting and hit it off. Gary is a communications coach at Coraggio.com, I believe is where you can find him. That's, guys, I said that right? Yeah. He's also done work with, I think it was George Mason University, William and Mary. Has spent some time as a professor doing work at either of those places. Yeah, and he's got this really cool story of how therapy kind of helped him have this breakthrough around escaping old patterns of kind of getting worked up about certain things and taking things personally. Yeah, Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks,
And
Brian. It's
yeah,
great to be here. Thanks for having me on. And so do you just want me to go into
yeah,
my?
let's dig into it. It's like the kind of the problem you were running into. You said that you kind of ran into this financial problem. Why don't you share a little bit about
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and then how therapy helped you with that, and then we'll show how that same therapy breakthrough helped down the road with this very rather upsetting thing that then happened.
yeah. Okay. So it started a long time ago, actually, when I was a little kid, and I never realized that it was a pattern. And I've learned that we often are impacted by traumas. I always think,
Yeah,
don't say what's wrong with these people. It's what happened to these people,
nice.
because there's usually some trauma associated with the behavior that we exhibit. So I realized that, and I'll give you a little bit of a background on this, that I would always get really, really upset about things. And I always, for much of my life, believed that if someone was upset or this really crazy, to me, terrible thing happened, at least in my head, that it must be my fault.
Mm,
And I think part of that is growing up with, in my early years with two alcoholic parents. I think that that's probably part of the syndrome, is that when you are the only child in a house with raging alcoholic parents for at least the first 10 years of my life. After that, they were lovely. But before that, it kind of impacts you a bit. And so fast forward to 2020, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm looking for ways to feel like I'm valued, I guess, professionally. And I saw an opportunity for a certification program, a professional certification program. And I talked to somebody that was in it, and a great, nice guy, talked about it. And I thought, maybe this is something I should do, not realizing that really at where I am in my career, that I'm probably going to retire in the next few years. I probably don't need a professional certification. I have enough clients that I don't need that.
yeah,
But
you've had
I just
a
thought,
never-ending stream of clients for years. Like,
right. It's crazy. And in the middle of this pandemic, I think the pandemic did crazy things to all of us.
mm,
So in the middle of this pandemic, I'm thinking, well, maybe I have time, I can
sure.
get this certification. So I go on, I pay the deposit. It was $650 or something. So I go on, I pay the deposit, and I'm feeling good about it. And then I get an email, and this person says, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about as you join our program." And I get on with the person, and I'm talking to, I believe it was a woman. I'm talking to her, and I'm asking a few questions. Like, I've read over the terms of the agreement. It was a significant amount of money to go through the program. It was about $18,000, and I'm thinking, I really want to check this out before I commit to it. And so I'm asking her questions, and I said, well, so you're going to be, and she says, I'm going to be your coach. And I said, oh, well, what's your background? And she said, well, I just finished the program myself. And I said, oh, so you just finished it like in December, and it's July, and you're going to be my coach. And I said, how long have you been working in this field? And she said, I just started. And I said, so I've been coaching for, at that point, 23 years. And I said, how old are you? And she said, 26. And I said, so you've been coaching not very long at all. You're 26, and you're going to coach me on my communication business that I've been running for 22 years, 23 years, very successfully? And she said, well, yes. And I said, oh, okay. And so I thought maybe this isn't the program for me. I didn't say that, but and she was pushing me to go ahead and read the contract and go ahead and sign that right away and send it over.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, okay, I'll take a look at it and all that. And I hung up and I thought, this is not for me. And I went and read the documents and I thought, well, this is really scary. And I asked some questions and there was a commitment of something like $200 a month for the facilities that they had online that you could use. And then you get roped in, it's even more. And I'm thinking, oh, this is not something I want to do. And so I wanted to cancel it. The problem was that I didn't have a printed version of the thing I had clicked on and paid the $650 deposit for. I didn't have the terms of that. So I didn't print it. And so I started to obsess about what I was really responsible for. And I was started to wonder and then ruminate, as I had for years, as we just talked about before, is that whenever something seemed to be not compatible with, or it was going to make somebody upset or whatever, it was my fault. So clearly I thought, oh, I'm on the hook for $18,000. I can't get out of this thing. This is going to be crazy. And I started panicking, which was my old pattern. And it was just repeating itself. And so I have two friends who are, one's a practicing therapist, and another is retired. And I reached out to them and I said, I need to work through something. And I told them about it. I told about some of the things that I grew up with. And I said, is my upbringing and my growing up, does that have an impact on the way I'm behaving now? And they both said, absolutely. And I said, well, what do I need to do about that? And they both said, we're friends of yours and we can't work with you in this way because you really need somebody who doesn't know you.
Yeah.
You need to find a therapist in town to work with. And I'd never talked to a therapist before. And so I found one. I think Psychology Today has ones you put in your zip code. They identify people that they work with, men or women or older or younger or whatever your issue is. And so I found this woman that was actually really, really enjoyable to work with. I saw her 2 times. It was online because of the pandemic. Wow. But I saw her 2 times and she walked me through some stuff, that was really, really helpful. And I thought, well, this is good. And one of the things that my friends told me, the one that was a retired therapist, she said, yeah, you tend to take things personally. And I thought, well, yeah, I guess I do. And the therapist, we touched on that a little bit in the 2 times we met. And so I walked away from that and felt good about it, that this freaking out thing was a pattern of the past, that I had the power to choose to change it. And when I felt it coming up, I needed to not respond to it. I needed to not let it play, if you will. I needed to make the decision that it wasn't helpful behavior, so I wasn't going to do it. So fast forward to December of 20, so just 6 months later, and I am served with a federal lawsuit. And it was because I was the chair of a board of a foundation that raised money for another organization. And this lawsuit was totally a surprise to me. And I'd never been served with papers. Well, I had for a traffic accident at one point years ago, but never had I been served with a civil thing like that. And so I was kind of freaked out about, well, I guess the traffic accident was civil as well, but it was a freaky thing. Yeah. And so I started into that whole program again of the pattern of obsessing, ruminating, worrying. What did I do wrong? Is this all my fault? All stuff. And then the therapy from the summer kicked in, and it's and I remembered my friend saying, you tend to take things personally. You need to not take it personally. And so what was great about having gone through that in the summer, that I was prepared for this thing that happened in the winter, because I believe that the folks that filed the lawsuit, they filed it not because of me personally, but because I was the chair of this board. and I was the main target. And it felt very personal, though. And my one therapist friend said that when she was practicing, she had counseled many Holocaust survivors, and that one of their big things was that they took it personally that their families had been killed by the Nazi soldiers in death camps or whatever. And she said, I had to work really hard with them to help them to realize and understand that the Nazi soldiers weren't doing it personally against them, that they were just doing it, whatever it was, their job or whatever, but that they weren't doing it to be, personally against these people, that it was they were wrapped up in this terrible thing that was going on. And so that helped me a lot to realize, I need to not take things personally, because the minute I do that, I'm not able to function in a very objective way. And I get into vengeance and wanting to get revenge and all those things which are not helpful. They make me very unpleasant to be around. And I thought that, wow, I guess I had this breakthrough in the summer of 20 with the therapy things that I did do and the input from my two therapist friends, and to be able to be prepared for this bigger thing that occurred in December of 20, and really life-changing, because now when those things happen, when somebody gets angry about something I said or I did, I don't necessarily take it personally. I now switch over and go, if I made a mistake, I need to own up to it. And if I didn't, and I'm just a pawn in whatever's going on, I need to not take it personally. And so I'm sure you're familiar with Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements.
Yeah.
And the second of the agreements is to never take things personally. And so I've really, that was just another confirmation for me that not taking it personally is a way better way to go.
Yeah.
So it was a breakthrough for me, Brian. It was, I'm in my 60s, and to be carrying this ever since I can remember, even as a child, that it was always my fault. Things were my fault. You did something wrong. You did something wrong. And I was just trained to go there, and to finally have a breakthrough at 63 or whatever, to say, you know what, hold the horses here. I don't have to accept what my brain is wired to tell me like that. That's patterning or something that, from the past that may not be true. And so I'm able to now step back from it and say, me taking it personally is not going to be helpful. And I'm not really able to work through it if I do take it personally and play the victim and that kind of stuff. So I hope that is helpful to folks who are listening and watching, because I'm sure that it impacts lots of people.
Yeah. And I've got a couple follow-up questions. Like, for one, so for not taking it personally, like, is there like kind of a system or process or steps you take, or is it just kind of like a reminder of like, this isn't about me?
Yeah, I realize that, and I read a lot, so I've done a lot of reading all this stuff. And it's our limbic system in our brain is it's the old caveman thing, like the tiger's going to eat you, fight or flight. It's the emotional part of our brain. We need to flee or fight, and freeze, fight, or flight. And so that's where the emotional, when the stimulus happens, it goes to that part of our brain.
Yep.
And we need to learn to interrupt that.
Yep.
And recognize the signs of what it is, and then allow the information to move to our neocortex, or whatever, prefrontal cortex, whatever, the place where we can logic and reason, and allow us to get the information there, so we can make a more objective decision about it instead of just reacting.
Yeah.
And so we see this when somebody cuts us off in traffic. We see that reptilian brain go into action, where we want to get revenge. We're going to get that person back, or somebody barks at us and we we flee the room, or we freeze and we sulk back into the background, and we don't want to engage anymore. So my solution is to interrupt that,
Yep.
because I now know what it feels like when it starts to happen.
What do you interrupt it with?
Different thoughts.
Okay.
And I have a lawyer friend who's been helping in this lawsuit that it's over now, but the lawsuit that was it was settled and stuff. But the lawsuit thing, he's really good, and he always says, because I want to suggest, I want to sue them back, or I want to do this, and he says, well, that might be fun, but it probably wouldn't be helpful.
That satiates the like angry revenge thing, and like kind of, but yeah, it's not.
But it wouldn't be helpful. So I run everything through that filter. So when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I go, okay, I could race up there and tailgate and like honk the horn and scream and yell. But I go, well, I hear him in my head, and he says, well, that might be fun, but it probably wouldn't be helpful.
I love that.
So that's what I play in my head whenever I feel that happening.
Cool.
I go, might be fun, probably wouldn't be helpful. So.
And what was the type of therapy that this was? And like, can you share a little bit like of what that process was that you kind of went through?
Yeah, what I remember of it, it wasn't like electric shock therapy or or sticking me in a freezing tub of water and submerging me for 10 minutes and hoping I could breathe through. It wasn't anything like that, or wrapping me in a blanket and beating me or something. It was, again, it was online because it was in the pandemic, but she was great she would just ask me questions. It was very Socratic method. It was, she only called me out a couple times on things that I would say. And so I learned to say things differently, especially about myself, which also comes back, I'm just thinking of it, in the 4 Agreements book. The first agreement, so the second agreement was to never take things personally. But the first agreement, if you recall, is that your word is always impeccable.
Yep.
And it's not just your word about other people, which means you don't engage in gossip, but your word about yourself needs to be impeccable. That doesn't mean that you fill yourself with false platitudes. It means that you don't beat yourself up. And so with this therapist, she would ask me questions, and as in the Socratic method, it's questions lead to more questions, which lead to more questions. And so she would ask me questions, and then I would answer, and then she would have another question. Yeah. And what started to happen was I was answering my own questions.
Yeah.
And and it was registering in my head. And then I realized this is what I do with my clients.
This is what we do also.
Exactly. I'm thinking, but even a therapist can't be a therapist for him or herself.
Yeah.
So I can't fix myself. You can't fix yourself. We suffer from things, and we have to find other people to do that. And so I think I don't remember what I said one time, and she said, but it was something that I said about myself that was not speaking about myself in an impeccable manner.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read the 4 Agreements yet. So she just calls me out and says, Gary, do you think that's acceptable conversation for you to have with yourself? And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I don't think so. And she goes, then why do you do it?
Yeah.
And she says, it's part of that. Is it part of that old pattern that comes back?
Yeah.
That's where something's wrong with you. And I really thought about it. So that was a kind of really more Socratic method therapy, where she's asking me questions that cause me to come to my own conclusions. I don't think she ever told me anything.
Oh, cool.
I think she just confirmed things that I needed to, that I identified that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I think even, I don't remember if I ever asked her, what should I do? But I've asked, I remember I had to have my cat put down in January of 21. And I remember sitting at the vet, and I asked the vet, what should I do? And he said, sir, I cannot tell you what to do. You have to tell me what you want me to do. Mm. And I think that applies here as well. If you got a therapist that's telling you what to do, then it's probably not helping you. I really enjoy, I mean, maybe there's a kind of therapy that works, but
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the fact that she would not tell me what to do, just like the vet would not tell me. You have
Yeah.
to make a decision. Then after I made the decision at the vet and with this therapist, they both confirmed that was the most effective decision to make.
Yeah.
And they gave me data that helped me to realize it was the right thing. And so I hope that answers the questions about
It
what kind of
does.
therapy it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's if you don't know the exact name, like that's that's fine. But yeah, it's also, I mean, yeah, we're coaches, which is different from therapy, but there is like, some overlap in
Right.
and like, yeah, and I think that's both how you and I both operate, is a lot of just like asking questions and letting people find their own answers. And like
Yes.
that's such a powerful thing, because then they just have a lot more like ownership of it. And
Yes.
that's also very different than like leading someone down a predetermined path that you have for them.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, and I know we're about at time, but I also have like one or two more questions. Do you have a
Sure.
little bit more time? Okay,
I do. I
sweet.
do.
Yeah. So one was like, you talk about how, so kind of the like panic that would happen and like taking things personally, and this was a repeating pattern, and you talk about it like coming from childhood. Like, is there a specific instance or like general instances you can share? If it's too personal and you don't want to, don't worry about it. But like, does it stem of like, oh, this one event and then I carried it with me forever, or like this type of thing would happen and I carried it with me forever?
I think, yeah, I prefer not to be too specific
Okay.
about it. I mean, I've shared that I had parents that suffered from alcoholism, and
Yep.
they, once they became sober when I was 11, they were wonderful people, loving parents, very supportive, and they were sober until they passed. My
Yeah.
mother for 38 years and my dad for 52 years. And so, they were great once they got themselves healed.
Yeah.
And so I think that it wasn't necessarily one event. I think it was just the trauma of experiencing. I mean, you can't pick your family. You're born into whatever you're born into.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know that there was one event. I mean, I think of a number of traumatic events that happened that probably to the casual observer at the time. I mean, please remember this is the late 1950s, the early mid late 1960s. There were no manuals for these kind of things. There was no self-help market.
Yeah. Not a lot of research done on child
No, I mean,
development and
stuff that
stuff.
happened, you just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Was the culture, at least where I grew up in Northern Virginia, the culture was you don't talk about those kind of things. Those are family things you just don't talk about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I don't know that it was one particular event. I think once I got into thinking about what kind of things it could have been, more things came to mind, I guess, where I could say, gosh, that probably did have an impact on
Yeah.
me, and excuse me, and me thinking that this was my fault. And of course, I have a sibling, and once my sibling was born, I was 10 years old. So a whole different kind of parenting occurred because my parents were 10 years more experienced and they had gotten sober.
Yeah.
And so the parenting for my brother was very different. And so he's in almost different generation, didn't experience what I experienced.
Totally.
And but I'm sure that he has things that influence his behavior today that, as we all do. So I don't know that it was one specific event. I think it was, as probably with all of us, it's a number of things. We tend to push them aside and not want to think about them because they're painful. And I don't think that it's necessarily a good idea to go wandering down that path because they can't really do anything about it now. Especially now my parents are both gone, and better for me to realize these are things that happened. Yes, it does influence who I am, but I don't have to be beholden to it. I can begin to choose a new path. I always have the power of choice, right? And so that's my big breakthrough, is that I don't have to be a prisoner to those things.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's also, just wanted to touch on the thing of like, in like your 30s and 40s, like, yeah, you weren't like, oh, I'm this way because of, parent. It was just kind of like, oh, this is just how I am. Or like, you're just kind of going through the motions. Then you look back and realize like, oh, wait, this is a pattern. And then you can
Yeah,
kind of see how it all starts. And then, yeah, that's so beautiful the way you say it, of like, once you kind of see it, you can start to choose to do other things.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
So that's my story. I'm sticking
Beautiful.
to it.
All
Boom.
right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Gary, for sharing all that and for being the first guest on the show.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, this is an honor to be on your show and help to spread the word. That people. I guess my final word would just be that you don't have to be. This sounds so terrible to say you don't have to suffer alone, but
yeah.
you don't have to be alone. And there's a lot of people that are going through similar things, and there are a lot of people who have learned a lot of things. And being able to have a community of people who are all they're part of being human. They're in the human experience, if you will. And I have a friend that always says, "Are you a human doing, or are you a human being?"
Yeah.
And so if we're just a human doing and we ignore all the things that are going on because we fill ourselves and our plates with all kinds of activities to keep us from thinking about less fortunate things, then we're human doings. But when you start to open up these things and think about them, and then you become a human being.
Mm.
And a human being that's the place I'd like to be, especially as I get older. When I hit about 60, I realized I have a whole lot of more years behind me than I have ahead of me. How am I going to maximize my joy and success and fulfillment and whatever in the time that I have left? It might be 25 years, it might be 30, it might be less. I don't know. And so, when you look at it that way, I go, wow, we have a community of people like you and other folks that are helping people to open themselves up and become more human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, if you are like, Gary's awesome, I want to know more about Gary, head to Couragio.com, Courgio. That's correct?
COURAGIO.com.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, anything else for where people can find you or anything like that?
No, I mean, you can find me there. You can find me by my name on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And yeah, and reach out. I'm always happy to talk to people. And even if I know that you and I have various scheduled chit chats, which I really enjoy. And I learn things every time we have one, and I'm happy to share with people. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's one of the things I've been very impressed with you, is just your willingness to just be available and be helpful, and like that's been very cool. And I've been doing like, I should probably it's been helping me to be more that way as well, which has been great. So thank you for that.
yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. Yeah. And so if you want to catch more episodes like this, you can hop on my email list at mccarthymindsetcoaching.com/join. Get regular emails of various mindset breakthroughs from a lot of my entrepreneur clients, freelancer clients, that help them grow their businesses. And we're also going to do more episodes like this with various breakthroughs people have in therapy and coaching. And again, yes, therapy and coaching are very different things, and sometimes there's a lot of overlap with the type of insights people have. So I just want to share it all so people know what's out there, because there's a lot of help out there that people don't quite know about, which is the whole reason we're doing this show. All right. Thank you very much, Gary, and I'll see you later.
Thanks, Brian.